excited we are to host this event here at our school. We have nearly our entire student body here to participate, listen, and learn.
What a thrill to be looking out at the face of what the Founding Fathers had in mind, representative democracy. And I'd also like all the students to stand. We've got students from Ashland, we've got students from Medford. Where are all the students? We'd like all of you to stand so we can give you a big round of applause. How many have never been to one of my town meetings before? Oh my goodness. That says it all, folks. That says it all. Well, what happens at one of our meetings is I start off talking a little bit, like maybe 40 minutes or so. Everybody really enjoys it. And those folks over there think I'm serious. No, that's not what happens at a town meeting. At a town meeting, and this is part of the pledge, Mayor John mentioned this, we've never done anything like this. Senator Merkley, to his credit, by the way, give him a round of applause. Because obviously there's so much going on in Washington, D.C. Sort of, how do you actually go about looking at all this? And you'll hear me talk a lot about what I call the Oregon way. We've had a special tradition. We're independent, we're innovative, we're compassionate. Little bit of that lacking back there right now. And we try to find some common ground. And very often we're able to, and sometimes I have to stand alone. That's what I did with the death of dignity issue. Because we were and I had to ask the Director of National Intelligence, does the government collect data on millions of Americans? Nobody else had asked it. Hey, guys, we got that straight. So, let's go right to your questions, because we try to do it the Oregon way, and part of the Oregon way is you work together wherever you can, and sometimes you have to stand alone. Mayor, let's go to it.
Okay, I'm going to call 3 tickets. The first one will be a red ticket, which is for students. The next 2 will be blues, which for non-students.
Even the microphones are worked up.
The senator has a rock band. He specializes in feedback. Red ticket. When your ticket number is called, stand up and put your hand up so you can get a mic. Red ticket number 4037. 4037. Where are you?
And while folks are getting ready, we also have a lot of people who made enormous contributions to this community. Peter Buckley's in the house. Where's Peter? Amy Amarine here does a great job for Jeff. Amy. Mayor Darby Stricker is here. Thank you.
Did 4037 get a microphone? Okay. Then here are the 2 non-students. 07.
By the way, on the students, because sometimes the students get a little shy and they've got their number and they're looking at their shoes. A couple of days ago, one of the students said to the other, because he knew that the student was reluctant to speak up, he said, better talk. I hear this guy's going to come to your house if you don't. So let's just have some fun here. We want to hear from students and adults.
Okay, here are the 2 non-students in the first tranche. 0798. 0798. Put your hand up, go to an aisle, and get a microphone, please. And the other non-student is 0711. 0711. Put your hand up and go to an aisle, get a microphone. Are we ready with the first student? If not, then I'm going to call a new student number. And that number is 4085. 4085, where are you? 4085.
Is there a sign of life? Is there a hand there? All right, you guys. Ashland has never gone bashful in the history of the city.
Okay, Erica Bear, would you please pick a student volunteer?
Okay, is there one right there? So somebody got a microphone, okay.
Senator Wyden, thank you for being here today and committing to town halls across all Oregon counties. On March 24, 2014, you issued a news release called Wyden Applauds Approval of Jordan Cove LNG Terminal, in which you urged the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission to approve a fracked gas pipeline through Southern Oregon to a proposed terminal at Coos Bay. Fortunately, FERC listened to local landowners, tribal leaders, and climate and environmental advocates and turned down the fracked gas pipeline twice. Now, with Donald Trump in the White House, the Canadian company that will profit from this has filed to ask FERC to consider this a third time. As the senior federal official in Oregon, will you commit to us today that you will join our community in speaking out against approval of the fracked gas pipeline and export terminal? But community members too, if everyone that is against the LNG pipeline could raise their hands.
Whoa. Here's where we are on this. And I've said that my guiding principles are going to be consistency and fairness. For example, I've made it clear to the company, no taking of property, no eminent domain, no riding roughshod over the landowners. And I've also said no fudging on the environmental rules. You mentioned FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. There are other ones. Now, we all know that in Southern Oregon, and I was glad you asked for a show of hands, there are strong feelings on this. So what I said at the very beginning of the debate is I really wasn't going to put my thumb on the scale, but I was going to make sure that both sides were treated fairly. And so right at the heart of fairness is no eminent domain and no fudging on the environmental laws. That's what I said at the beginning. Those are my views today.
Senator, we're going to take one more student question.
That was a pretty good one.
We learned in Ashland that our high school students are the equivalent of PhDs.
Might have to bring them to Washington for an assignment or two.
Okay, here's the second student, number 4073. Where are you? 4073. Here we go.
What do you think will happen to those of us who depend on OHP now that Obamacare is being rolled back? And how do you think this will affect those who depend on OHP?
Terrific question. students are now 2 for 2, by way of those who are keeping count. The question was about the Oregon Health Plan and, of course, the Affordable Care Act. I'm the ranking Democrat on the committee, the principal committee, the finance committee, that's got authority over the Oregon Health Plan as relates to the federal government, and Medicare and Medicaid and the like. And I'm just going to put it out real simple. Before we had the Affordable Care Act, the insurance companies could discriminate against somebody with a pre-existing condition. What that meant was that health care in America was basically for the healthy and the wealthy. And the first thing I want people in Jackson County to know is, on my watch, we are not going back to the dark days when health care was for the healthy and wealthy. This great question has a number of pieces to it. For example, the Oregon Health Plan is really intertwined with services for people of modest incomes and Medicaid. And you're going to hear a lot of talk about all kinds of different approaches that people are going to say promote flexibility on Medicaid. We don't have any problem with flexibility. That's always been good for Oregon. But I'll tell you, we are not going to let flexibility be used as a Trojan horse for draconian cuts in Medicaid while the wealthiest get tax breaks. And a third part of the Affordable Care Act debate, and I imagine we'll come back to a variety of aspects of it. I led the fight against the nominee to head the Department of Health and Human Services, Congressman Tom Price. I basically spent 24 hours around the clock coordinating the opposition to it. And one of the reasons that I did is it's clear to me with respect to women's health. Congressman Price has a career of trying to deny women the opportunity to go to the doctors they trust, and on my watch, that is not going to happen.
Senator, we have now 2 non-students, blue tickets. I'm going to call the numbers again. 0798, are you here? Okay, go ahead.
How to quit while I'm ahead.
I really want to thank you. I met you in an airport as well about 10 years ago and shook your hand again, so thank you. We've been working for over 10 years on the climate change and energy plan here in Ashland, and we're about to present that to City Council and the Mayor for approval. It's one of the strictest and most advanced climate change and energy action plans that we know of today. Being a Democrat in a Republican-controlled House and Senate and executive, what are your plans in the next 4 years to be able to tackle this issue, this huge issue?
Great question. And enormously important. And when we tackle climate change, everybody knows we're not just doing it for now. We're doing it for our kids and our grandkids. My wife and I are older parents. We have twins that are 9. We have a baby who's, well, now 4, bright red hair. And pictures available on my iPhone later. But the point is, the reason that question is so important is that we've got to put points on the board every single day in the fight against climate change. That means looking for renewables wherever you can. Solar, geothermal is a natural for rural Oregon. I'm very proud that we were able to get the biggest research grant ever, very recently for Oregon State, to look at tidal and wave energy, which makes sense because we're on the Pacific Rim. So every day you get up and you try to put points on the board in the fight. Now, it's clear you got to also figure out ways to take bigger steps, bolder steps, because folks, we don't have time to wait. You look at these numbers from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Agency, the oceans are rising, the climate is getting hotter. This takes a toll in our forests. So we understand what this means right here in Southern Oregon. And there's been a really encouraging development here in the last, I would call it the last 6 months. More and more major companies, the people that you think would probably be the most reluctant to be bold, are now saying, we've got to figure this out. And they're actually starting to put the costs of climate change into their budgets. In other words, they're saying, hey, this is going to cost us and our company a lot of money. And last week in Washington, D.C., 3 of the Republican stalwarts, George Shultz and Jim Baker, I think Hank Paulson was with them. These are the most eminent Republican officials. What were they doing on Capitol Hill? They were arguing for carbon pricing. Carbon pricing. So, look, people ask me all the time, what do I do in this kind of climate? And I'm going to come back to carbon in a minute, but I want to put it in the larger context of what we do. And I would sum it up where there are policies where you disagree. You speak out, you push back, and you offer a smart alternative. And I'll give you an example of one from the last week. You might have seen this fella from the Trump administration. His name is Steve Miller. And he was on TV Sunday last saying the power of the president is not to be questioned. Can you imagine what Mark Hatfield or Tom McCall or some of the great Republicans would have said to that? But what didn't get as much attention, is he also said 3 million people voted illegally in the 2016 election. Now, set aside the irony of the winners saying that people voted illegally. Because normally you complain if you did win, but set that aside. There is not a shred of evidence, that 3 million people voted illegally. But I've said to the Trump administration, I don't think you're right on it, but if you're going to insist on it, there's an answer. Take Oregon's vote by mail national. I've introduced legislation to do this, and we've been trying to bring folks over on the Republican side, apropos of a good question with respect, to climate change. We're not there yet, but they're getting interested now. And you know why? We have a paper trail for every ballot. A paper trail for every ballot. And given, I know we're going to talk about Russia in the course of the morning, given what happened with Russia, I think we're going to get some conservative security hawk folks say, hey, if somebody's got a good way to protect the electoral process, I'm willing to look at it. So whether it is climate change, whether it's empowering citizens to participate in the political process, we got to get up every day and try to put points on the board. You probably saw Kelly Conway on TV a couple weeks ago. And it was the day after the Women's March. Give yourself a round of applause on that. Every time I talk to somebody about the number of women who were in Southern Oregon marching gets bigger. I'm now at 50,000, is that right? So, Nancy and I were marching. There were scores of folks from Oregon there. It was thrilling. And then the next day on TV, and I knew exactly what they were up to because you kind of watch these folks and you're getting a kind of pattern. Kellyanne Conway represented President Trump, and in the middle of the discussion with Meet the Press, she said the president has no intention of releasing his tax returns. No intention. And she said that was litigated in the campaign. I don't know of anybody who voted, whether they were for Trump or Clinton, who cast their vote saying that if Donald Trump won, you let him out of his pledge to release the returns after the so-called audit. All right. So Kellyanne Conway did that at 11 o'clock in the morning on that Sunday. And I said, and I don't get to watch these shows very much, I said, this is nonsense. And you probably know I've introduced legislation to require the president to release taxes. After Kellyanne Conway did it at 11 o'clock in the morning, I spent the rest of the day reaching out to grassroots groups. There are a lot of groups, there are groups at the state level, there are nonprofits. They're all mobilizing for the same thing, for disclosure and transparency. I gave an interview to the Washington Post in the late afternoon. That helped feed the grassroots. So what happened? The next day at 1 o'clock, Kellyanne Conway told another whopper. That's what William calls them, whoppers. She said, oh, you know, he's going to release his tax returns. We never had any plans at all to not release them. Which was directly contrary to what she said on Sunday. So the point was, this is going to be battle after battle after battle. But I'll tell you on the tax returns, folks, this is the lowest ethical bar we have had for 40 years. And I'm going to make sure it is required.
We're going to have another blue ticket now, 0711. Are you here? Do you have a microphone? 0711. Okay. The next blue, 2076. 2076. Put your hand up. Is there? There's 2076 up there. We're getting a microphone to that person. Okay.
Hi, Senator Wyden. Glad you're here today. My question is...
Where is my friend out there? Oh, there he is in cyberspace in the back.
What are you prepared to do to overturn privatized prison, for-profit prison industry on the short term, and the so-called war on drugs to put an end to mass incarceration in the state of Oregon?
Great. It is usually a sleep-inducing project to read an entire bill, but I have, as the ranking Democrat on the Finance Committee, and we have jurisdiction over the tax code, I have introduced legislation to take away the tax breaks for building private prisons. Long overdue. It runs completely contrary to what a lot of the latest reform-minded thinking is saying about criminal justice, and I'm going to do everything I can. We'll have a tax bill. Mr. Mnuchin, the Secretary of Treasury, his critics call him the foreclosure king. He said they're going to have a tax bill by August, and I'm looking forward to... Today we'll talk some about taxes, but we're going to get that bill to take away the tax breaks from private prisons, period. It is incredibly important. Black Lives Matter has made it one of their priorities, and I support it.
another non-student up in the stand here, over here. Senator.
Senator, I have a question for you, and I'd like to say first that I think the manner of political discourse in our country has caused much greater divisions than are necessary, and I'm wondering what could be done in the Senate and other places, of course, to help change that and diminish the level of polarization that is causing so many problems for all of us.
Three cheers for you. And I've always said, if there's one thing I want to make part of my time in public service, and I've been so lucky. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You know, I went to school on a basketball scholarship, dreaming of playing in the NBA. It's a ridiculous idea. I was too small and I made up for it by being really slow. So I've been in a lot of gyms and the like, and that's why it's so great to see representative democracy practiced here. And I've given your question a lot of thought, because I've had a lot of bipartisan legislation, had a bipartisan tax reform, bill. And we urgently need tax reform. This is a rotting economic carcass. It clearly favors people who were born on third base and thought they hit a triple. So we've got to fix this. And I've had a bipartisan bill to do it. We've got a lot of seniors here. I mentioned Congressman Tom Price. Congressman Tom Price really doesn't get what Medicare is all about. For me, ever since my Gray Panther days with the senior citizens when I had a full head of hair and rugged good looks, Medicare has been a promise. It is a promise of guaranteed benefits. So I now have a bipartisan proposal to update the Medicare guarantee, the Medicare promise. Because folks, today, Medicare is not what you thought of in 1965, like somebody broke their ankle or something like that, or got a bad case of the flu. Today, Medicare is cancer, it's diabetes, it's heart disease, it's strokes. It's going to gobble up everything in sight. And for you students, it's Thursday. So, like, you guys are going to go out on a date maybe tomorrow. You guys are going to talk about Medicare? What am I missing? Of course, if you're a teenager, you talk about Medicare. And obviously I'm kidding, but I'm barely kidding. Because in terms of the budget, Medicare is here, everything else is here. Now, what I want to do is work in a bipartisan way. I want to work in a bipartisan way to update the guarantee. Let's care for more people at home. Let's have more non-physician providers. Let's make better use of telemedicine. We've got Democrats and Republicans who can be for something that makes better use of scarce dollars. But what we've seen since January 20th is not much interest in bipartisanship. And I'm going to give you an example of the difference, because it's really important. That student, where's my student who asked about the Oregon Health Plan and Medicaid and stuff? It's a great question. Where's that student? Okay, he's up in the bleachers. Good. The debate about the Oregon Health Plan and Medicaid, because of a Republican decision, not mine, a Republican decision, will go forward under something called reconciliation. And it's the most partisan thing in Washington. Hardly anybody knows what it is. They think this couple's coming back together, they're getting reconciled. But reconciliation is the most partisan thing in Washington. So we're being denied from day one. This was the first thing President Trump said he wanted to do. First, legislative effort. So here's what I've said to the Republicans. I've said, look, if you'll set aside this partisan agenda, there are a lot of things Democrats and Republicans could do to make the ACA stronger, the Affordable Care Act, and we can do it in a bipartisan way. Let me give you an example. One of the biggest challenges, and you've been reading about it in the newspaper, I'm convinced now I got to stand in back. Okay. One of the biggest challenges is what's called the individual insurance market. It makes up only about 6 or 7% of the population, but it's where a lot of stuff has gone haywire. And the people in the individual insurance market are folks who don't have government health care, Medicare, VA, or something like that, and they don't have an employer package. Now, if the Republicans said that they'd be open to doing something bipartisan, the first thing I'd say is, here's how we fix the individual insurance market. Let's create larger insurance pools so it'll be easier to spread the cost and risk. That'll hold down the premiums and make it more likely we can get younger and healthier people into the pool. I'm convinced if they'll set aside the partisan route, that they're, with the example I just showed you on a very pressing issue and other ones, whether it's tax reform or infrastructure and the like, there are opportunities to do it, but they've got to want to. Now, on the plus side, based on watching a little bit of TV late at night, I gather some of my colleagues are having town meetings and they aren't going so great. And be interested in exactly what you're talking about, because from my time in public service, trying to find a way to get to common ground without giving up your principles, and that often gets missed. Bipartisanship, folks, is not about taking each other's bad ideas. Anybody can do that. It's about taking each other's good ideas. Thank you.
Senator, are you ready for another student? Okay, student, call out if you've got this number, 4019. 4019. Are you here? Okay, the next student is 4079.
Policy can be repealed?
I want to make sure when we talk about immigration, you talk about are you talking about Donald Trump's new immigration policy?
Either, yeah, just like as that one, or possibly as just a state.
Great. First of all, when we start the debate about immigration, let's make sure the first sentence out of our mouth is America has always been a nation of immigrants. My father came to this country in the 30s. Not all got out. We lost family at Kristallnacht, Theresienstadt. All he wanted to do was join the army for the new country he had fallen in love with. Well, the army was not all that interested in Peter Wyden because he was really overweight, he had really flat feet, and a fair array of allergies and the like. So they weren't much interested in Peter Wyden. So to a great extent, as far as I can tell, he talked his way into the military because he said, look, I was a German kid. Let me write the propaganda pamphlets and we'll drop on the Nazis. Tell them they're not afraid. And then die. And that's what the immigrants, that's what the tradition of immigrants has always been about. You come to the freest, most open country on earth. and you contribute. And I'll tell you how I'm going to look at these proposals. I'm very much opposed to this flawed idea of Donald Trump yesterday. It's still in the kind of press release kind of form. The choice on immigration is one of two routes. You can continue to play the blame game, or you can decide to fix it. The Oregon way is to decide to fix it. And let me tell you, you don't have to walk that far to see what it's going to take to fix it. Because George W. Bush, a conservative Republican, and the late Teddy Kennedy, always admired as the go-to person for liberal thinking, liberal legislation, pretty much had an agreement. And we took that in the Senate and we got a very large bipartisan vote for it. And I'll just tell you what the key elements are. The key elements are, first, you're going to strengthen what you do at the borders. Everybody understands with technology and resources, you can strengthen what you do at the borders. 1. 2, you're going to enforce the laws on the books. So that means if an employer knowingly hires somebody illegally, the employer faces a penalty because they broke the laws on the books. And the two of them really went to the guts of the debate. What are you going to do for those, and there are more than 11 million, who are in the country undocumented today? And they pretty much decided that if those people come forward voluntarily and pay a fine because they broke the law, and show they have broken no other laws, and show they've mastered English, they go into the queue for citizenship. I still think those are the elements if you're serious about fixing it. If you're serious about fixing it. And I was just trying to imagine what I heard on the news yesterday. It's our 9th town meeting, and so we've been getting a little miles and trying to get clips everywhere. I was trying to think what it would mean in Southern Oregon if you had a hard-working person in the fields and might have been there for 20 years and came undocumented. And since they came, they have done absolutely nothing but being a model citizen. Okay? Now, President Obama started us towards where we ought to go. If somebody commits a serious crime, they're deported. Not rocket science. Okay? Serious crime. But if that person was picking pears in Southern Oregon, love our Southern Oregon, I guess that person is going to go to bed in fear, wake up in fear, and probably after their job, if they hear their little girl needs a medicine, they might be fearful of going out and picking up the medicine. And if you think I'm making this up, souls all over the newspapers this morning of people not doing those kinds of things. So let me just tell you, the Oregon way is better than that. We are better than that. We can fix this. We can fix this. And I personally think George W. Bush and Ted Kennedy had a pretty good model, and I'm open to other ideas that people have that build on those kinds of principles.
We have another person queued up here. Molly, is it a student?
We have a student back here.
Go ahead.
Senator Wyden, it is physically impossible to build the pipeline without eminent domain. The pipeline impacts over 400 landowners who will not sell their property to a pipeline that will destroy our rivers, homes, and eliminate many things. Many of the landowners are here today. Since this company will eliminate eminent domain, why won't, or since they will use eminent domain, excuse me, why won't you commit today to oppose the pipeline?
Another knock it out of the park student question. Part of what you have to do as a legislator is you've got to make tough calls. And this debate began when I was chairman of the Energy and Natural Resources Committee at town meetings on the South Coast, which is sort of right in the center of it. Of course, other parts of Oregon care tremendously, as we've seen. And people were passionate on both sides. People came in, by the way, the labor unions, labor folks saying we desperately need jobs. We've been hearing about it for years. And then wonderful folks on the environmental side. And I said, look, I'm chairman of this committee. I'm going to do one thing that hopefully is the Oregon way, which would give both sides a chance to be heard. And I announced that. We had people from the Department of Energy coming up. They wanted appointments. I said this publicly. I said there's a very strong feeling about this. And Oregonians care tremendously about the environment. They care tremendously about family wage jobs. I want both of them to get a fair shake. And at that point, they were actually thinking about cutting off the debate. I said, that's not the Oregon way. So when the debate actually began, I said we've got to have some consistent principles. One of them, I said, was no fudging on the environmental laws. None. Zero. No. Underline. Period. We're not going to let any part of Oregon be turned into a sacrifice zone for any project. That's number one. And number two, no eminent domain. So if a company isn't going to find a way to make sure that landowners are protected, they're not going to meet the test. Period.
May I call upon and call up? Can we let the senator here, let somebody else ask a question? 2012, that's a blue ticket. Are you here, 2012? Stand up and respond, or I'll call another.
Thanks for being here. We really appreciate it. We have a man in the Oval Office who is seriously disconnected from reality. I don't think he's ever heard a conspiracy theory that he doesn't embrace. Will there be any process if it is shown that no one seems to be able to direct him, control him? If he does become a clear and imminent danger to this country, what processes are in place?
Well, as you know, there are a host of approaches. The 25th Amendment, obviously, is one legal process. Impeachment originates in the House of Representatives. So those are the two kind of processes. So I hope that responds to the question. Folks, there are two processes. The 25th Amendment is what the Founding Fathers saw as the tool for removing a president. My colleague in the House, Earl Blumenauer, has an interesting concept, apart from what you think about Donald Trump, that you would bring in former presidents and vice presidents to be part of it. It's an idea that I know is going to get examined. And then for impeachment, the formal process originates in the House of Representatives. I heard a rumor it was Republican control.
Can we take another question, Senator?
And apropos of this, because I'd like to make sure that every kind of question we walk away with a sense of something we ought to do to protect the Oregon way and our values. A United States Senator has a lot of tools at their disposal. A lot of tools to advance Oregon values. And I'm just going to give you an example of a couple. On the night that Donald Trump was sworn in, everybody goes off to a fancy lunch, and then they come to the floor and do things that are kind of non-controversial. And Mitch McConnell, without any notice, stood up and said, I ask unanimous consent, and he had maybe 5 minutes for a side, I ask unanimous consent to pass the nominee to head the Central Intelligence Agency. Now, the Central Intelligence Agency is one of the most important agencies in our country. Because, and by the way, don't let anybody tell you you got to give up your liberty to have security. You're entitled to both. Entitled to both. So, Mitch McConnell asks unanimous consent to go to this. And the room's very quiet. I get up and I say, I object. Oh, everybody's eyes turn to me. Because what they were really thinking about was whether their tuxedo fit and they were going to go off to a bunch of balls. Nancy and I watched the Blazers on TV. But the point is, there wouldn't have been a debate. And most of the country wouldn't have found out. I objected. We got a full debate on Monday. And the country found out that the head of the CIA, the new head of it, has advanced the kind of privacy-invading proposal that goes beyond anything I've heard of. He has proposed a centralized database. This is the guy who's now heading the CIA. They want to do lickety-split. A centralized database that would collect information on the lifestyles of law-abiding Americans. I mentioned also, I'm not sure they'd want to look at too many Congress people if they passed that. But the point is, I objected. And I'll tell you something else, because I'm on the Intelligence Committee. My older child calls it the so-called Intelligence Committee. And I got provisions in the bipartisan agreement for open hearings and subpoena power and the right to declassify. But I can tell you, based on getting around and talking to people, a lot of people think this is all going to get put aside, is going to be a whitewash job and the like. I want you to know, I have never seen anything like this in my lifetime. And I commit to you today, to the people of Jackson County, as I've done at every single stop. I am not going to let the Russian investigation get swept under the rug. For decades, Democratic presidents, Republican presidents, Vladimir Putin, KGB, if the Russians were doing what they're doing to the Ukraine and Crimea, and human rights violations and poisoning journalists, our Democratic presidents, our Republican presidents would be pounded sanctions and all kinds of other stuff. Well, this president, and there have been lots of stories about his family having very extensive involvement over the years with various Russian projects, has not said one critical word about the Russians. You hear rumors of lifting sanctions and the like. So, to me, we've got to get to the bottom of it in terms of intelligence. And I'll tell you what I'm interested in seeing, and I think apropos again of progress, because I suggested 2 weeks ago, we need Mike Flynn to show up for an open intelligence hearing, raise his right hand, tell all of you what happened. And of course, we need to see those tax returns. When the president says, oh, I have no involvement with Russia, no anything, tax returns don't lie, folks. They're numbers. Unless you want to get in trouble with the IRS or something. But it's the lowest ethical bar. It's not the highest ethical bar. It's the lowest ethical bar. So getting to the bottom of this Russian issue, which started in October, as you'll recall, when the head of national intelligence and the head of Homeland Security said that the Russians had been hacking our election systems. And then in January, we had James Comey, the FBI director, in front of the Intelligence Committee. And we had about 45 minutes a year to ask questions in the open in the Intelligence Committee. So if I ask something, I'm like asking about something I think is important. And so I read from some public news clippings, not intelligence materials, public news clippings about Russian foreign ministers saying that they had had contacts with the Trump campaign. And I asked Mr. Comey, are you looking into these reports? And if so, what do you have to say to the American people? And he said, oh, I just couldn't say anything like that in public. And as you all know, he had plenty to say 11 days before the election. So that helped spark the drive for a bipartisan inquiry that included public hearings and subpoena powers and declassification. And that just kind of sets the backdrop a little bit because it is both intelligence policy and, with respect to tax returns, a basic issue of transparency.
Six 0756. Are you here? Call out. Put your hand up. Okay, 0755.
Are we calling for students, John?
Blue ticket, 0755.
Is that students or adults?
That's a non-student. It's up there.
Okay, right.
Being here. I appreciate it very much. My question is about the transfer of federal lands to states. First day of session, the House changed rules to make that happen. And in our own state House, they are changing rules to make that happen. What can we do to prevent that?
Well, I want you to know that it is my policy, and I'm still a member of the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee. On my watch, we are not going to have these huge transfers of federal lands to private interests to exploit. Senator Merkley and I have a proposal for the ONC lands, which of course is very important in this part of the state. We get the harvest up in a sustainable way. We double the harvest on average for the next 50 years. But the bottom line has been we are not going to transfer federal ownership, period. Now, here's a reason to be a little optimistic. And I've still got a lot of due diligence to do here. So I'm not making an announcement about the debate or the vote or anything like that. But the person that was nominated to head the Department of Interior, Ryan Zinke, apparently walked out of the Republican convention. He's a congressman from Montana, a duck, by the way. He walked out of the Republican convention over his opposition to transferring federal lands to private and state interests. So, stay tuned tuned. I've got a lot more due diligence to do on this, but might be a little ray of hope. And I guarantee you, he'll do plenty of stuff that I'll disagree with too, so I'm trying to factor all that into myself.
Ready for another student?
Good.
Red ticket.
Sir, we have a volunteer, a 6th grade volunteer right here. Ron? Distraction? Sorry. 6th grade.
Okay.
If you were able to add more funds to the schooling district, how do you think it would affect the education of our students?
Question was, if I was able to add more funds to the school district, how would it help? I think it would make a big difference, and it's been something that's been important enough to me that I've continued to stay on the committee. It's called the Budget Committee, to try to get more money. And particularly in our state, you probably heard, we're trying to get the high school graduation rates up. We're proud of a lot of stuff, folks. A lot of stuff. We are not proud of the fact we're kind of near the cellar on the graduation rates. And I was able to get, with bipartisan support, in the recently passed education bill, the opportunity for more funds to go to schools that are having problems getting the graduation rate up, and they could have programs where companies could come in and work with students, and then students are in a position to get jobs when they graduate and the like. So terrific question, and let's give him a big round of applause. Okay? And before we go any further, did any of the students come today to talk about this really horrible decision yesterday for LGBT students? I'd like to let a student have a chance to express themselves on this, and then I'll give my 2 cents worth. Is there a student that would like to talk about this?
Right here.
Right here in the front.
Wow, I do not normally get stage fright, but this is a huge mass of humanity. So, hi guys, Senator Wyden, thank you so much for being here. I think that I really do speak for a lot of my peers when I say that what is happening right now, especially for LGBT, but especially transgender students, is really upsetting. And it's not as much of an issue in Oregon because we are mainly in Democratic control here, but what actions can we as citizens take to help protect transgender students in other typically more red-leaning states? Because those are who I'm concerned for.
Great job. And a couple of points. First, when you make policy, you gotta come up with policies that are gonna stick, because political types come and go. Okay? Your point was really good, and fortunately, we have been more progressive on these kinds of issues. But here's what I believe happened, and I'll have to get a full kind of briefing. What I think the administration tried to do administratively, and this was Jeff Sessions. I voted against Jeff Sessions. This is one of the reasons why. Jeff Sessions led the effort to basically say the federal government isn't going to make this a tool of non-discrimination, because that's what we're talking about. This is, at its heart, it is a liberty issue, it is a non-discrimination issue, and it is a question of individual rights. When I came out for marriage equality in 1995, when a lot of gay folks said, I really should wait, I said, if you don't like gay marriage, don't get one. And nobody is forced to do anything under the LGBT order other than show that they believe in dignity, that every single American is entitled to dignity, decency, which is that everyone, all of us, is treated fairly. And those are kind of my D's as it relates to discrimination. And I'll tell you, you did a great job asking the question, and now I got to ask for the order. We have to go out in a determined way and make sure we roll back the rule that came out yesterday that was discriminatory to so many young people. We're going to have to be determined. To roll this back. So thanks for speaking out.
Ready for another blue ticket? Blue ticket 0577, where are you? 0577. Way up there. Senator walking down on the right.
Hi. Thank you, Senator Wyden, for coming to see us today. 40 years ago, I was working at JCPenney in Washington Square up in Portland, and you came and talked to us in the lunchroom. And at the time, politics, I was like, duh. And what happened was, we got in the elevator together to go down 2 floors. And I will never forget the silence that was in that. I had nothing to say. I didn't know what you were talking about. And 40 years later, that's not the case anymore. So I'd like to know how many people here today are indivisibles? Are we on the right track? In your honest opinion?
Oh, you're asking my opinion about
Yes,
indivisible? I think it is a terrific grassroots organization. I would ask to make one request. As I've gone around the state, I was in Crook County and the metro area and big counties and little counties. I saw all the cool signs that say agree and disagree. It would mean a lot to me if there were also some signs that said the Oregon way on it. Because I think a big part of our job is to try to convince people who don't necessarily agree with us, don't necessarily agree with most of the speakers here tonight. I've had a fair number of Trump